podcast. I am your host, Mike Klein, and in this series, we are going to meet some of the world's comms disruptors. These are people working in and around communication who are really changing the game, challenging old assumptions, acting on new ideas, and demonstrating a willingness to share those ideas. Today's guests are no exception: Emma Bridger and Lee Smith. When it comes to internal communication, employee engagement, and employee experience, Emma Bridger and Lee Smith are among the truly major names in these fields. Please take a minute to introduce yourselves. I'll ask Lee first since I know you a little bit better.
That's very kind, Mike. Thank you, and great to connect. I think we go back about 15 years, don't we, or more, maybe
Absolutely.
more now. So it's great to join you for this podcast. Yeah, Lee Smith. I've spent just over 3 decades now in the communication business. I started out at the age of 19 in PR and external comms. I did that for a little while before I discovered this amazing thing called internal communication and the challenge of bringing employees along on the change journey. And I then crossed to the dark side and specialised from that point forward in internal comms. I spent about half my career working in-house, mainly professional services and financial services. And I then set up an agency called Gatehouse, which is now part of Gallagher's fast-growing employee experience and comms empire. And then Emma, who I also have known for over a decade now, and I got talking, a couple of years ago, about the big changes that we're seeing in the world of work. And we both felt that now is the time to really up the volume in terms of employee experience as a concept, which we'll explore further in this podcast. So I'm now with Emma, co-founder of the EX Space, which is a membership-based learning community for EX professionals.
All right, Emma, could you introduce yourself?
Sure thing. So I fell into comms like a lot of people do, I suppose, from quite an unconventional route. I started my career as an academic. I was a university lecturer and research in behaviour change. And I worked in the field of health psychology, and I was kind of working on health promotion campaigns. How do we get people to change their behaviour? A lot of that involved communication, albeit kind of external communication. And in 1998, I decided to move to Brighton, in the northwest of England, and didn't have a job to go to, the sort of thing you do when you're young and take risks. And I was kind of thinking, well, what am I going to do now? And I saw this job advertised, internal communications job for the local energy board. And I thought, well, I'll give it a punt. There's quite a lot on that kind of job description I can do. I lectured in communication. I understood it, although it wasn't internal. Anyway, I went for the job, and to my kind of delight and surprise, I got it. And that was the beginning of my internal comms career. So I spent sort of 10 years in-house, and given my background, which was, I guess, not a traditional comms background, although I understood the kind of science of communication, I always came at internal comms from a kind of a behavioural change point of view. Why are we communicating? Because you want people to do something differently. So how do we kind of achieve that? And along the way, kind of broadened my expertise into employee engagement, employee experience. Did 10 years in-house and set up my company People Lab, which is an employee experience and employee engagement consultancy 15 years ago. And I have a real passion to help people thrive and be their best selves at work. Hence why we set up the EX Space to help practitioners do more with less. I've written a couple of books on the subject as well. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. We know that when we get it right with our people, great things will happen. So I have a real passion to help companies, just do the right things.
Passion for companies to do the right things. That's a very nice passion to have. Wanted to kick off the conversation partially because, there's a lot of terms that have been flying around. Employee experience, employee engagement, employee value proposition, employer branding, employee communication, internal communication. I first want to ask, what do we mean specifically by EX, the components, the philosophy, in general? We can then talk about your take on it, but I just want to make sure that we're all in the same conversation here.
Do you want to take that first, Sam?
Maybe
Yeah,
instead.
sure. I'll kick that off, seeing as I've written a book on it. So employees have always had experiences, good, bad, or ugly, right? That is nothing new. We have an experience when we go to work, and from a psychological point of view, an experience makes us feel something. Either it's a great experience, or it's a terrible experience, or it's a mediocre experience, whatever it is. Okay. And I think over the years, organisations and experts, subject matter experts, have woken up to the fact that we can intentionally design great experiences that benefit the employees themselves, they benefit company, they benefit customer, they actually benefit society as well. Lots of research coming out. If we're having a good experience at work and we go home, it contributes to our lives. It makes our lives richer. We work a long time. It shouldn't be a bad experience. So I guess we kind of differentiate between employee experience as something that the employee feels and experiences versus the practice, which is what we talk about, which is the practice of intentionally designing great experiences, kind of getting very real about this, saying, actually, you know what? We have some kind of stake in the game here. We can really think about the experiences our people have. We can understand which experiences make the biggest difference. We can put our people at the heart of this. We can genuinely take time to understand our people and understand what experiences make the biggest difference for them. No surprise that often the onboarding experience is one of those. The communication experience is absolutely critical. We know what happens when we get that wrong. So it's really, for me, employee experience is really thinking about the practice of intentionally designing great experiences that then unlock engagement. So when we get the experience right, then that translates into people feeling or experiencing engagement at work. Like, yeah, I'm happy to be here. I can give my best work here. I'll recommend this place to other people. All of those outcomes that we're looking for. So that's kind of a very kind of simple way that I approach this and look at this.
It's
I
interesting
think
that you mention a number. I'll let you jump in a second. You mentioned a number of things
sorry.
here. That it's about experiences. You mentioned about how employees feel, um, and unlocking engagement. You also touch on happiness, which is a whole, you know, happiness at work is another related but fairly distinct discipline, that I've had some conversations with over the years. So you're in a fairly interesting space. Lee, could you add what you wanted to add, please?
Yeah, I think, for me, if we break it down into basics and what do we mean by the term experience, and an experience is any occurrence or interaction that has an emotional impression on you, that leaves an emotional impression on you. So, EX is very much in the realm of kind of managing, shaping, guiding emotions rather than managing information. And I think this is, we've talked in internal comms, Mike, for many, many years about hearts and minds, but we still today are very much in this world of content and channels and pushing information. And we'll get into this more, but very top down, very parent child in style. And at the heart of this, if you put to one side the term employee experience, and I get that not everyone, not that doesn't resonate with everyone just yet. What we're talking about, as Emma rightly says, is intentionality. So designing for those experiences, and being genuinely human centered. That's the other big part of it. And I think the bit that we often miss within internal comms is being genuinely human centered, involving people in shaping solutions, not just doing it to them. So it really is as a kind of, there's EX as a profession, and we can theorize on that. Then there's the kind of EX mindset for me, which is just about operating in quite a different way to what we have in the past. And it's, and it's an imperative. The world of work has changed immensely in the last 5 years. It's going to change even more as we begin to embrace AI in the next 5 years. This really is the time, what we call the EX era. It's the time to embrace this and start to reshape how we interact within organizations with our employees.
So, if you boil it down to a key distinction, it's the distinction between to interact with employees versus to inform employees, at least in terms of the distinction between EX and traditional internal comms. Is that a fair assessment?
I think that's a big part of it, Mike. The other, I guess, bigger part perhaps is its kind of holistic nature. So as Emma said, this is about the entire life cycle. It's about what happens before someone becomes an employee, how they interact with that organisation when they fill in a job application online, what they see of the organisation outside of it. So it's much more holistic and multifaceted. And, I'm sure we'll touch on who owns EX and those kind of challenges as we get into this. But, you can see already it's not something that is easily owned by any single function. It's a broad. You think about emotions, you think about those experiences. They can happen at any point in that journey and be shaped by pretty well anything within the organisation.
So you mentioned the journey, and I've kind of mapped out the first 5 steps of it, but I'd like to see what you consider as the full journey. So you start with application, then you look at post-application exposure. The idea being like, once you buy a blue station wagon or start looking for blue station wagons, you start to notice blue station wagons. So you start to notice the company after you've applied in a different way than you did before. Then the interview, then the post-interview interactions, then the onboarding. What follows that you consider part of your purview?
Yeah, I mean, just to jump in there, this is where we get into human-centered design, right? Because for years, there have been lots of different teams, different departments who are all involved with the people side of the business. So internal comms, reward, recognition, HR, who've all been incredibly well-intentioned, but have made a lot of assumptions about what that experience should look and feel like for their people. Now, the big shift for me, and this is where I think internal comms are so well placed to really kind of add huge amounts of value, is we talk about employees and now the consumers of the workplace, right? There is no one better place in the organisation than internal comms to genuinely understand employees, right? They are on the front line. They are dealing with the nuances, the feelings, the emotions, everything that goes on every day. They get those emails from their disgruntled employees. We've all had those when we were in-house, right? They are so well placed to understand that experience. And I think in previous years, like I said, those kind of different teams, departments, very well intentioned, but they kind of create solutions in an ivory tower. They would kind of create solutions that they felt were best practice without really understanding how that experience felt for their people. So just to give you a great example, let's talk about, your first impression your first few days with an employer. And again, there's a lot of kind of neuroscience behind this. We know that one of our cognitive biases is primacy recency. That's why first impressions are so important. We remember our first impression. So your HR team, your comms team, they could put loads of effort into maybe building a beautiful kind of, website, intranet site to welcome people, lots of information, lots of resources, and that's all great, and the HR team can kind of do loads of work on that onboarding process and the different kind of touch points. But when you start with an organisation, let's imagine you're starting in a physical place. That first day, how do you feel when you walk in? Do the people there make you feel welcome? Do you feel like, this is the right place for me? And I always talk about one of my experiences many years ago when I was working in-house on my first day. I started in a new team, and my boss, unfortunately, wasn't there on my first day for whatever reason it was. And my new team weren't very friendly. They weren't very nice to me. They weren't particularly pleasant. They all went off at lunchtime. Nobody invited me to go for lunch with them. No one told me where to go. I still remember that to this day. And my husband calls these my golden balls of pain. So you just carry them around, you shine them, right? And that is my overriding memory. I don't remember what the employee handbook was like. I don't remember what the intranet site was like. I don't remember even if my kit worked on day one. I remember that I wasn't made to feel welcome, right? That is where we can really move the dial on this stuff. And I'm not saying the other stuff isn't important, but the beautiful thing about taking more of an EX approach and using the tools that we advocate, so using things like design thinking, positive psychology, agile, is we can really get to the heart of what is going to make the biggest difference to our people. It stops us wasting time. For example, in internal comms world, how much time do we waste on perfecting the latest roadshow PowerPoint? I mean, maybe AI will kind of change that, but days, hours, weeks, months sometimes. And does that really improve the experience of our people? No, it doesn't. It has minimum impact, you know. So my hope is that with this kind of new era that Lee and I talk about, is that we'll be able to actually work on the things that make a real difference to people. And we know from internal comms, you know, we've got a good sense of what that looks and feels like. People want to know, you know, just tell me what's going on, keep me informed, keep me in the loop, help me understand how it affects me, you know. Actually, having a beautifully kind of, you know, beautifully presented, drafted, whatever PowerPoint that shows the latest figures, it's probably not going to, I'm not going to go there, so that's a great experience today because that PowerPoint was fantastic. So it kind of helps us to focus on doing the right things that are going to make the biggest difference to the experience our people have.
Let me just absorb that for a second, because really it's coming from the whole angle of emotion, and it's coming from the angle of positivity and welcoming and making people feel comfortable or special or whatever it is that you're aiming to make them feel. And a couple of things jump out at me. It's like, A, to what extent is employee experience aligned with the actual work experience? Or is that something that's not necessarily integrated into what a lot of the EX world is focusing on? I think that's something that's jumped out at me as a red flag when I've seen conversations about EX in the past. You know, when you've got, for example, a really diverse organization, say a municipality, that has office workers, ditch diggers, sanitation workers, youth workers, prison guards, but they all work for the same people.
Yeah, this is something I feel really passionate about, Mike, because I think we get a real knowledge worker bias when it comes to engagement, EX, and internal comms. We imagine everybody works in sexy offices and do kind of like cool jobs. I always talk about my days of trimming lettuces when I was a student. I'm not going to swear, but it was a rubbish job, right? It was, you know, literally a really hard job. I stood in like this kind of industrial sized farm every day, on my feet all day, literally taking the outer leaves off lettuces and chucking them onto a revolving table. Was I engaged in the work, the job, the task that I did? No, I wasn't. Was that a great experience? No, it wasn't. And there are a lot of people out there that do jobs that maybe when they were growing up, it wasn't their dream. They don't have the privilege that we all have, right? Of being in careers or doing a job that they love, right? They have to do a job to make ends meet, or for whatever reason, that, you know, that they are, as you said, they're cleaning an office, they're working in prisons. And what's interesting is that there are so many other ways you can improve the experience and you can get your engagement. For example, for some people, they are very much engaged by the purpose of the organisation, right? They say people that are really passionate about a cause. They might go work for a charity. They don't care what job they do. They love the fact they're working for a charity. Or maybe you're passionate about the music industry. You just want to go and work for a record company. You'll do anything in that environment. You don't care what the job itself is. You hope that one day you'll be able to kind of work your way up and get something cool, but you just want to be in that environment. I call that kind of big P purpose. But there are also people that are not really engaged and inspired by big P purpose. So those people who go, you know what, I'm trimming a lettuce for a living. If somebody put posters around that industrial factory kind of lettuce trimming place and said, we're helping to put salad on the nation's tables, I'd have felt pretty insulted by that. It's like, don't try and make out this is something bigger than it is. I'm just trimming lettuces. However, that experience was a great experience for me because the team were brilliant, the people were brilliant. The folks that run that place knew they had to get their engagement from something other than the job we were doing. So there was pizza parties, there was loads of team bonding. They treated us really well. They made it as fun as they could. We had playlists, we had music. You know, it wasn't a bad experience because there were other ways that we could have a great experience at work other than just the job that we did. So there are many facets to this. And this is where it comes back to, I think, internal comms. Internal comms are really well placed to understand what makes a great experience for their people. And they're really well placed to understand what engages their people. And there's never going to be one size fits all here because there's no single way of defining engagement. So starting off by saying to people, what makes your time at work a great experience for you? And understanding the insights that come back from that, that gives you your kind of benchmark and you can build out from that. So for some people, yeah, it might be big P purpose. They might go, I need a cause. Other people, it's like, no, that's not it. I just want to work with great people. I feel like I've done a good job and understand that I've made a contribution. So that's, I guess, for me, going back to internal comms, they are so well placed to start that understanding for an organisation of where this all begins. And once you know that, then you build out from there. Then you intentionally design experiences that hit those kind of insights, that hit those kind of elements of what makes a great experience for your people. Lee, I'm sure you've got something to add on that as well.
Yeah, I will add. I think, as Emma talks there, what you'll understand very clearly straight away is that, an internal communicator or indeed any other functional chief can't do this alone, Mike. That, once again, we're in the realms of enabling and bringing line managers and leaders on board. So that work, the day-to-day work component's hugely important. We know from research that Emma has done over the decades, and there's lots of other research that underlines the model that we use, which is called the EX lens. But we know what the components of a great experience are, and part of that is what we call the work. The day-to-day work, which is about having impact. It's about having the right level of challenge with the right amount of support. It's about having autonomy in your day-to-day role, and these are things that that's beyond the reach of many internal communicators, but is very much within the gift of a line manager. And certainly internal communicators can enable and support line managers. We can partner with HR, with learning and development, to make sure line managers have the skills to be able to deliver autonomy, challenge, and communicate impact to their people day to day. So again, it's really multifaceted. This is not something a function or individual can do alone. It's about building the right coalitions, and being ultra aware of emotions as you go through that journey.
No, that's clear that this is. This is really it's a much more expansive approach to, for lack of a better term, culture, centered around, how employees are made to feel, or at least encouraged to feel, through a range of interactions, touch points, etc. I think the thing, I've got a number of more practical questions, but I think the thing that still makes me a bit nervous about this space is the extent to which the space is resilient in the face of shocks to the organization. Anybody can talk about an organization as a family, but then when you cut 20% of the staff arbitrarily with no notice, a day later, what happens? What happens to the best designed, most elaborate employee experience model when the fundamental experience of do you belong to the organization gets thrown into the mix?
I think
Yeah,
that's I
sure.
think that's a really great. I'll start. I think that's a really great point, Mike. And I think that what we're sort of turning to now is the link between EX and change and transformation. And actually, at times, during times of turbulence and change inside organisations, the need for that, I think, is more important than ever. And you can do change and transformation in a very human-centric way. You can bring people along on that journey, even when there's tough decisions to make. And I think that's as much part and parcel of the broader EX piece as anything.
Yeah, we know resilience. We do a lot of work around resilience, and my background is psychologist and a positive psychologist more latterly. So, resilience is not just about bounce back. Resilience is about building capacity to deal more effectively when these kind of changes come along, or these kind of things come from left field and shock you, if you like. And I think that what I've seen over the years is that where we know, in organisations where we really take the time to genuinely know our people and understand, their needs, their motivations, their behaviours, we are so much better equipped to build that resilience. So, for example, I'm guessing in our time, all three of us have probably been involved in some pretty big transformations, and some not particularly pleasant, and we've probably seen them go really well, and we've probably seen them go really badly. And where they go well is where the people side of the business is brought into that conversation from day one, where we're there from day one saying, hang on a minute, I know from my experience of working with those teams over there, that's going to land really badly. I know the best way to take them through the journey is X, Y, and Z. We're able to give that kind of expert advice, that consultancy to the project managers, the program managers in the middle who are just kind of trying to get through the milestones and, the Gantt charts, etc. And I think where we're able to genuinely know and understand our people, of course, we're going to do a way better job on that than, where we haven't taken the time to really genuinely put our people at the centre of what we do. So I think actually this approach helps to build that resilience. So when those kind of big, tough decisions have to be made, and they come from left field, we're in a far better place to cope with them than we would be if we hadn't taken this approach at all. So, yeah.
I think just to build on that as well, I think change for me should never come as a shock. Big change should never come as a shock. If we are doing our jobs well as internal communicators, then employees should understand the competitive environment, the economy, the performance of the organisation. So major changes should never come as a surprise to me. So, that I think that's a big part that internal communicators can play in creating that sort of backdrop and context for change. The understanding as to why are we doing this? Why are we doing this now? Hugely important. Change for me should never be a shock.
So I think one of the things that you're basically saying is that as EX looks to create both a holistic framework, but also experiences that generate positivity and warmth and other feelings, that the responsibility of internal comms in some ways moves in the opposite direction to create, a context of reality into which these things can happen. Is that a fair assessment of where this relationship could go in a way that's mutually beneficial?
I was going to say, I think that's part of it, Mike, is a shift to sort of create the right, if you like, mood music within the organisation for those experiences to take place. But again, if you look at the components of a great experience, internal comms is woven right the way through that. So, I'll just reel off a few. Trust is one of the components, right? So internal comms plays a big role in building trust in senior leaders, in managers, in each other. Meaning is another hugely important part of a great employee experience. Employees are looking for meaning and purpose in their work, while internal communicators create the kind of strategic narrative that guides and points to that meaning. And we could go right the way through it. Everywhere you'll find there's a role and a support role that internal communicators can play that helps unlock great experiences, community building. You mentioned earlier, creating a sense of belonging, showing appreciation. These are all things that internal comms can move the dial on.
No, this is really good stuff. I think this actually takes the maps out the connection between the two in a way that's actionable, which is great.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add to that, Mike. I think for me, the big difference is that because taking this holistic view and this holistic framework allows us finally to get out of our silos, which we've been in for years. We're very comfortable in our silos for years. They've worked for us. But there's so much opportunity for comms to add so much more value. So for me, I think that the practicality of this is really about helping to direct resources to this stuff that's going to make the biggest difference. We know that, like, if you're a good comms person, got a good comms team, you're a victim of your own success, right? People start to go, I'll have a bit of that, and suddenly you've got everyone and their dog coming to you and going, can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? And it can get pretty overwhelming in internal comms. Like, how do I prioritize this? And often it's the most powerful voice that gets this comms resource, right? That's not necessarily the right thing to do. And I think the big shift for me is that by starting with the human-centered approach and saying, let's really understand where we can make the biggest difference. So, for example, a good example is we know that onboarding experience is critical. How often do internal comms teams get involved with onboarding? And maybe some progressive organisations they do, but probably not that much. They're kind of stuck in the the same old piece of like being the CEO's mouthpiece and all that usual stuff, and putting together kind of content for internet sites, etc. Now, I'm not saying we don't need some of that stuff, but it enables us to kind of take a step back and say, where is communication going to add the biggest value to the experience that people have in our organisations? Now, just to also pick up on another point that you mentioned about this is all about people feeling warm and fuzzy. There is a part of that, yes, but sorry, fuzzy, no, that's not the right word, fluffy. There is a part of it that's about that, but it's also about hygiene experiences. So we know that hygiene experiences, i.e., have I been paid on time? Have I got the right tools to do the job? Do I know how much I'm getting paid? Do I know where to find stuff? Those experiences aren't about positive emotion. If you have those experiences, you don't. If you get those experiences right, you don't notice them, right? But those experiences are about ensuring we don't have disengagement. So if you get those experiences wrong, you will know about it. So communication has a big key role to play in that, because if you don't tell me
it's
what's
very
going on,
interesting that you say that. The hygiene experience is the seamlessness of the IT and HR
yeah,
interface in particular. Indeed, there are a lot of people who call themselves employee experience folks who are only focused on the hygiene of the interaction of IT with HR. Some people say EX equals IT plus HR. That's a fairly common view. To what
yeah.
extent can you accommodate that while integrating it into the more holistic view that you have? Because one of the big challenges is you got lots of people using the same terminology to
Yeah.
describe very different things.
I think that's a really, really good point, Mike. And this is why I think conversations like this are so important, because we need to have some really good, respectful debate about this stuff, right? We don't have all the answers yet. We're still figuring it out. Absolutely, to your point, there are a bunch of people who are jumping on this bandwagon thinking, oh, I'm just going to like relabel what I do as EX, or I can see, or from a consultant side of point of view, oh, I can see there's some money to be made here. I'm going to like shift my internal comms consultancy to call it an EX consultancy. It is not the same thing, right? So that's why I really welcome and love some really good debate and challenge. What do we mean by this? How do we make it practical? So I think it's a really, really good point. And EX is not just HR plus IT. In fact, there are lots of, we go back to that point I made before about we're in a very knowledge worker privileged position where IT is such a big part of our jobs. But there are a lot of people out there that IT is not, doesn't feature. And people kind of really challenge me on that. But I work with a client who make cast iron pipes in a foundry in Telford. IT does not feature for those employees at the moment. It might in the future, but here and now today, and probably the next few years, it's not a part of their experience. They don't have phones. They don't have, it's old school, right? There are a lot of people around the world who that is their current reality, So it's too simple to say it's HR plus IT. For me, it's about going through the journey that marketing and customer experience have gone through over the last 20 years, learning from them. If we can kind of take that same approach and really put our people at the centre of what we do, understand them, and then build what we need to build around them, as well as taking in the needs of the organisation and the needs of a customer, because we can't just do everything for what we want from an employee point of view. We've got to think about the needs of the organisation, but that's really the big shift for me.
I'll just add to that as well, Mike, and I think you've hit on a really important risk there. And we saw this with engagement, right? Engagement, we took 2 decades into serious conversation around the engagement agenda now, and really engagement as a concept has been kind of hijacked by tech. It really, in many organisations now, when you talk about engagement, that it equals a survey. It's about a tech-based survey tool and chasing some single metric, which really isn't what this is about. And there's a risk here as well. The one thing that bugs me more than anything right now is repeatedly reading about so-called employee experience platforms. Well, right, based on this conversation alone, it's pretty easy to see that there can be no such thing as an employee experience platform. No bit of tech can control every
There is no such thing as an
interface.
employee experience platform. I will make sure that this quote gets singled out in the promotion of this.
Good.
Um,
Please put an end to it.
um,
It just doesn't exist,
Okay.
does it? It's multifaceted, right? It's about humans interacting with other humans. Yes, there's a tech angle to it. Yes, there's a workplace, the physical environment in which you operate as an employee is part and parcel of this. But really, this is about human beings working together. It's about the essence of what an organisation is, which is a group of people working towards a common aim. That's really the essence of what we're talking about here. I think the other bit, while we're in the sort of space of kind of dispelling myths, I'd hate people to think, listening to this conversation, that it's kind of, Emma used the phrase soft and fluffy, or it's like a happy clappy thing. It
I
absolutely isn't
actually
that.
kind of indicated that. I
Yeah,
wouldn't make a source of that, to be fair.
and we're in the realm of emotions, absolutely. But this is all about an end, and that end is about the performance of the organisation, right? It's about unlocking engagement and all of the incredible outcomes that delivers in terms of productivity, profitability, you name it, whatever your organisation is trying to achieve. That is ultimately what this is about within the context of
Is it
organisations.
is it really is it really about unlocking engagement, or is it about unlocking performance? I mean, as you both are aware, I've been a fairly strident critic of the whole concept and the whole execution of employee engagement. And I've always seen it as a very indirect way to get from intent to performance. Why do you say unlocking engagement and not unlocking performance?
I think it depends. It depends how you're defining engagement and how you're measuring engagement ultimately. And I think this is where we often go wrong: is that the measures, that sort of engagement index that so many organisations are obsessed with chasing, is the wrong thing. That is not ultimately what we're shooting for. It's it's the outcome, productivity, profitability, etc. I know you're passionate on that one.
Yeah, the science is really clear on this, and I know, Mike, we've had some really good, and I say I always love the kind of conversation challenge debate on this, good conversations around employee engagement. Obviously, I've written a book on it, so I am a fan of it. I mean, there's no single universal definition. There's 50 plus and counting, so that makes it really hard to measure. I think fundamentally we get sidelined by the debate about what it is and what it isn't. And ultimately, the bottom line is, I think it's a basic human right for people to come to work and be treated well, and be able to, be their best selves, to thrive. You know, the days of where people would, like, back in when I first started the workplace, world of work was very different back then. There was bullying, there was harassment, people were treated. I mean, when well, I actually won't share the stories now, but I've got some great stories about things that have happened to me over my career. So there's a book in there probably. So I think the debate about what it is and what it isn't, it just derails us from the fundamental truth, which is, when you get it right with your people. Check out the Sean Aker TED Talk on this. He's a Harvard professor. The science is really clear. When we have the ability to have a good experience at work, when we feel good at work, so maybe when someone says, well done for a job, well done for doing that job, or maybe when we have a fun time with our colleagues, whatever that might be, when we have positive experiences at work, basically it unlocks dopamine in our brain and a whole range of neurotransmitters, a whole cocktail of neurotransmitters flood our brain. When that happens, all of our learning centres are switched on. And that is why there's a link between how people feel at work, whether you choose to call that engagement or not, I don't care. How people feel at work, when they're in that good place, it unlocks performance. And there's loads of great studies around this. For example, doctors making diagnoses from case notes more quickly, more efficiently, and more accurately when they're in that place than those doctors that aren't. Proven time and time again. The science is really clear. You get it right with your people when they have the opportunity to feel like that, then they will perform, because that's how our brains are wired. It's the opposite to when we're in fight or flight, which a lot of people are in at work. A lot of the time they're stressed, they're burnt out. Fight or flight, our brain goes into tunnel vision. All of our wonderful high order cognitive functioning that we need at work to perform, so our creativity, our problem solving, our ability to make connections, all of that goes out the window. So this is why when you're stressed and burnt out, you're no good to anybody. When you're in a good place, you are just on your game and you'll perform. That's why we see the link between how we feel and performance. So it's a really clear scientific link that I wish more people knew about.
It's a win-win. It's a win for the organisation in terms of performance, Mike, but it's also a win for the individual who's living a far happier, more fruitful life. Ultimately, that there are two sides to that coin.
Okay, so basically, the take here is that if you improve and consciously address the employee experience, you augment those elements of the experience that generate more positive reaction. You downplay or eliminate those things which can unsettle the employee. Then you have a pathway to better performance. And I guess this comes back, I get it. I mean, at an intellectual level, I get it. I'm still uncomfortable with it from one perspective, which is that, and this is particularly something that I saw in British companies when this stuff was starting to come out in the 2000s when I was at Smythe Door Lambert, when you had the initial attempt to integrate psychology, communication, marketing strategy into a way to improve performance. This was actually before people started using the term employee engagement. And it was interesting that you said there were 50 definitions. I've only counted 21, so I'd like to know the other 29. To what extent is all of this necessary, or is it just simply is a big part of it just people being clear on what they're supposed to do, what the context of the organization is, and the extent to which the values are lived by instead of just simply spoken? Could we improve the employee experience dramatically just by taking the inconsistencies out of it rather than trying to make it more pleasurable?
I mean, it isn't just about being more pleasurable. I think just kind of getting the nuances of the semantics here. Um, you know, Often people say it was a great experience because it's really tough. We've all had those times in our career when actually we've delivered something that was really hard work, and it perhaps wasn't great every day. But we look back on that and go, that was a great experience because I did it. I feel great. So it's not just about it feeling nice, right? Often challenge. Actually, if you look at, when we're cruising, when things are too easy, we don't tend to have a great experience then. Now, I'm not saying we need to kind of burn people out, but we like to get our teeth stuck into something. So it's not just about it being pleasurable, but it's about it being positive, which I think is a slight difference. So it's about going back to understanding what does good look like for your people. Okay, so um, I was with a client yesterday, and absolutely this challenge is having a big project, having something to get your teeth stuck into. I know for me, to have a great experience at work, I need to be busy. I need to have something that's going to keep me interested. I can't have it too easy because that I get bored, and then I won't feel good about my experience, right? So it isn't just about it being pleasurable. And I think going back to your point, Mike, about the values and the connections, I think we can make some assumptions about that, but we need to go find out. We need to. This is the whole point, right? We can sit in an ivory tower and decide that we know what's going to transform the experience for our people, but we might get halfway there, we might get all the way there, we might get none of the way there, but we can't make those assumptions. And again, in the work that I've done, when you have those insights from people you're working with, I keep going back to internal comms are so well placed to do this. That gives you so much influence and so much power, and it gives you a voice, and it gives you that seat at the table that we still hear internal communicators kind of, talk about. When you're able to say, look, this isn't my view, this is what your people, the C-suite, this is what your people are saying. And then suddenly they're interested. They sit up and take notice. And this is what's going to make the difference to them. So we found out from work we've done, from however we've done that work, it doesn't have to be onerous. It doesn't have to be like a big, massive kind of insight piece. You can do this quite quickly. So just go and talk to people. Just go and sit in a canteen or go and spend time with somebody. And you will have those amazing insights that the C-suite will absolutely love you for. And it's those insights you say, and this is why we're recommending we work on X, Y, and Z. And that is, for me, the game.
So essentially what you're saying is that for employee experience to work and to authentically reflect the organization stayed along the journey, you need some serious qualitative research, whether it's sending people on, into the canteens in a somewhat orchestrated way, or doing focus groups, or asking open-ended questions and testing the alignment between where the organization thinks it is, where employees think it is, and where the organization wants to go. If you're not doing that, all of this stuff is basically wallpaper and ping
Absolutely.
pong tables
Yeah,
and pizza
you can call it qualitative research, or you can just call it listening, Mike. And I think there's a lot of talk right now about being more strategic in how we listen to employees. Yet in so many organisations, that listening amounts to a single, once a year survey run on some engagement platform. That's not listening. What you've described there is genuine listening, and that's what internal communicators can fight for and make happen. Absolutely.
No, I think that's a really good insight, a really strong insight that given the movement towards this kind of talk and this kind of approach, that internal comms people, and really comms people in general, if they want to make sure that this works, they need to fight for the base of data and the willingness to ask the right questions to allow this to align with, so that you're getting the current reality sorted out before you're building something new on top of that current reality.
Absolutely spot on.
Rather
And
than just simply creating a fanciful version too and hoping that everybody can just simply accept it as real.
yeah, I think you absolutely nailed it there, Mike. And I think the best comms teams I've worked with are the ones that are really curious about employees, right? And they want to get out, they want to meet them, they want to get to know them, they want to, they want to walk in their shoes. They develop, maybe a set of behavioural-based employee personas, whatever it might be. They know their employee base. And I mean, many years ago, I was brought into a large bank. I won't say which one it was, to really kind of help to motivate the comms team, because the sort of leader had noticed that they were just sat in the office day in, day out, and they weren't out getting to know the people. They were just kind of chained to their desk. And I think if you're in internal comms and you spend all of your time, I mean, it doesn't have to be physically, but all of your time kind of at your desk, not getting to know your people, the employees, then for me, you're not doing the right job. You don't physically have to go out and meet them. Obviously, we've got amazing tools now, as you can get to know people by the power of Teams or Zooms or whatever you use. But you should internal comms should be the kind of the absolute go-to team to say, tell us about our people, more so than HR, I think, because they are so well placed to do that. And that is where I think you really move the dial on, the value that you add and the way that you are seen by the rest of the leaders in the C-suite.
So I guess from an internal comm standpoint, as we come up to the end of our time here, it seems like there's an interesting plan of action that's implicit in what you're saying. That the first step for internal comms folks, indeed for communicators, is really to listen to, to get into the business, start asking the questions, not even just of employees, but all of the stakeholders that we engage with. The second is to fight for the ability to do this research on a more systematic, qualitative basis, rather than just simply some things like ENPS, which might tell you there's a problem, but won't tell you what the problem is, or what the opportunities are, rather. And then you also talk separately, and this is something that I've actually developed a course in. How do you actually take initiative to impact things like onboarding and impact, elements of the new employee experience in tangible ways, thus reinforcing your value to it? Is that a fairly good, initial set of things for an IC function to do in an EX-oriented environment?
I think it's a good start, and it again, Mike, the great communicators out there are already doing a lot of this stuff. We've been talking about a lot of this stuff for a long, long time. Becoming a trusted advisor, building those bridges, working across functions and boundaries, listening. The theories on two-way communication go back 50 years plus, and still we're operating in a very top-down, directive, cascade audience. The language we use is all wrong. So I think, there are baby steps we can take, and absolutely those are the right ones. But really, there's an opportunity here to embrace a new way of operating. I genuinely think this is about reimagining the way that we approach internal communication. And I think for me, there's those steps any internal communicator can take. There's also really important to think about the macro trends that we're seeing here, right? So the world of work has changed beyond recognition in the last 5 years. Those trends were already happening, right? Then there was COVID, the pandemic changed everything overnight. We've got the delights of work from home, hybrid now emerging as the sort of dominant model there. We've got at the same time engagement levels plateauing across the world, very stagnant levels of engagement, the great resignation, all these sorts of things. And what we're seeing is employees now more than ever are demanding new and different things. They want more from work. They want the sort of experience that we're talking about creating here. They want autonomy. They want to be challenged. They want to know that they've made a difference and had an impact. They want a sense of belonging. They want to be appreciated. Those things have always been there, but now more than ever, they are really, really prominent. Add to that AI and what's going to happen in the next 5 years and the pace of transformation. Many people predicting that we're going to see more change in the next 5 years than we have in the last 50 at work. And you've got a crisis forming now. Right now is the time to be embracing that as communicators, thinking about what that means for how we operate and what we do day to day. So I think in a long answer to your question, but yeah, great place to start, but grab hold of this opportunity because it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, I think.
Right, and when I was suggesting those three things, I wasn't saying that was the full stop, but it's like a lot of internal comms folks don't even have much of a toehold at the moment because they're too busy producing stuff and trying really they're trying to protect their jobs as much as they are anything else. I mean, job insecurity from just the interactions that I have through Weekly Comms and other activities that I do. Job insecurity for internal comms people has never been higher. And so the issue is, how do you transcend that feeling of insecurity? How do you put some initial runs on the board so that you can get to be the trusted advisor, so you can get into some of the conversations that are taking place about future work, that you can get into the design of something that might otherwise end up as HR and IT and IC has to just simply implement.
Yeah.
Because it seems like, we've moved from a very small one directional playing field to an almost infinite playing field. And people in the internal comms world are still trying to win that one way game. So I guess, if you have any advice I'll ask you about two kinds of advice before we finish, because I know we're coming up on our hour here. What advice would you give a mid-career, and particularly an unemployed or a fearing of becoming unemployed mid-career internal comms professional about navigating in this environment?
Shall I go, Lee? I think
You go.
the game changer for me, and Lee and I have done a number of sessions on this at the IOIC festival last year, and I've run webinars on it. It is pulling on different tools and techniques. So I'm actually really all about the practical, believe it or not. I'm about okay, how do we make this work in day to day? That's my absolute passion. And for me, using tools from design thinking and agile are going to really, really give you a huge advantage over people who are using much more traditional comms approaches. So what I mean by that is kind of taking the kind of classic design sprint approach. And it's a really practical way of leading you to doing the right things and coming, taking the right approach without having to overthink it. So it starts off with scoping. Where are we now? What's the ideal? Okay, so that's that insight piece I've talked about. It doesn't have to be big and scary. You can do that really quickly. Use video ask, run a few online sessions. It doesn't have to be a big, massive program. Just do it quickly. Get to know your people. That insight will give you gravitas and build trust with your senior stakeholders. They'll go, great, you know our people. You're giving me stuff that's really valuable here. The middle part is about the kind of the opportunity space. It's where we get into the kind of human-centered piece. How well do we know our people? To what extent can we stand in their shoes? How can we empathize with them? So we know that this big change that you're talking about, we've got a really good handle on how it's going to affect our people because we've got all this great insights and data. So we can use those practical tools, things like journey mapping, things like empathy mapping. So it's really practical. And then, and only then, do we get to solution, which is like ideation and prototyping. Again, tools that comms very rarely use. You know, prototyping is such a gift to a communications person. Let's go out, let's prototype, let's pilot this, let's save us, you know, let's protect us from making really big, expensive mistakes that we might make by buying in a really sexy piece of software because we tested it. So again, you're adding so much value to the organisation and the C-suite all the time by taking that approach. So I would say, get up to speed with using design thinking tools, agile tools, and start to build them into your comms approach, and they will give you the right answers and they will take you down the right pathway and they will give you a huge amount of trust, credibility with your stakeholders. So that's, for me, is how I think you would protect your career and give you that kind of advantage over other people.
Got it. Lee, do you have anything else to add on that?
Yeah, love that. I'm just nodding in agreement. Design thinking really is a game changer. You know, it's almost flipping how we currently operate on its head. You know, we're all about, as internal communicators through my career, we've been all about, you know, scripting the messages, designing beautiful stuff, doing all that, you know, strategic narrative in a darkened room. This is the complete opposite of that. It's about working with people, talking, helping, enabling them to co-create solutions, co-create the narrative, whatever it is you're working on, involving people in shaping that. So it's an absolute game changer. And I think Emma's right. That really is quite key to shifting from, you know, a sort of audience mentality to a genuinely human-centered EX mindset, which is really what we're fighting for and talking about here. I would add to that, and you know, you rightly touched on it, Mike, is the whole listening piece. You know, listening is really at the heart of this endeavour. In a real sense, you know, we're not talking about surveys there. We're talking about getting out, talking to people, focus groups, qualitative stuff, interviews, doing design thinking is part of that research. Really understanding, again, Emma touched on it, that what makes our employees tick, where they're at psychologically, what's holding them back. That's where we can add value to the organisation. And if you add value, then you know your role is going to be safe.
Got it. Anything else you want to add?
Shall I just jump in there? I think
Please.
that the internal comms profession are a wonderful bunch, and they're hugely creative, and I so enjoy working with this bunch of people, and I just think we've got an amazing opportunity to really move the profession forwards. And I started this in 1998, and I still hear some of the same kind of conversations happening that were happening like 20 plus years ago. And I think we're better than this. I think there are some fantastic people. And I think that there's, as Lee said, there's a huge opportunity right now to really elevate what we do in internal comms and add that real value. And I think let's go for it. Let's grasp it. Let's do it. We're really creative. We can make this happen. We can really start to, to move this forward. So, yeah, I think it's a great opportunity. Let's do it.
So is it fair to call you guys Comms Disruptors?
I think
yes.
so, yeah.
We like to disrupt.
Excellent. EX space and what you're up to these days.
Yeah, so the EX space was created, launched about a year ago, Mike. We've got an amazing group of kind of pioneering EX professionals that are part of our community now. It's a global community. We have more members outside the UK right now than we do inside. And we're about three things, really. We're about delivering world-class learning, many of them led by Emma in terms of the masterclass program that we run to help you become what we call an EX master. We run a series of bite-sized learnings as well, which are available on demand. it's about delivering the tools. That's really important, the tools to be able to hit the ground running and actually make a difference and deploy some of this stuff. So giving practitioners the right toolkit to do all this, not just the theory and the frameworks. And it's about bringing people together, so like-minded community that gets the whole employee experience thing and wants to progress that agenda. And those people come from all walks. We've got HR people. We've, of course, got internal communicators that are part of our membership. We've got EX and engagement professionals, change practitioners, and many, many more. So it's a broad church. Membership now is completely free. We have a paid plan as well, a professional plan for our full access to everything that we offer. But we also have a free plan. It takes about 10 seconds to sign up, and you can access a world of great EX resources within minutes.
And I want to thank you very much for your time today and for taking part in my Changing the Terms, the Comms Disruptors podcast series. Once again, Lee Smith, Emma Bridger, very much appreciate your time today and your disruptive take on the intersection between communication and employee experience.
Thank you, Mike. It's been a blast, and thanks for having us.